Would you ever tell a leopard to change her spots? Number one, no, because that's absurd. And number two, asking the animal to ultimately change something she was born with would take away the essence and the beauty of the animal. Not only that, it would be physically impossible. Would you ever ask a walrus to go on a diet? Most of us would say no, again, because number one, that's absurd. And number two, asking the animal to ultimately limit its natural capabilities and physical strength would ultimately harm and kill the animal. So let me ask you this. In our status quo today, why do we feel like it's perfectly justified to tell just young children, 2 and 3 years of age, that there's something inherently wrong with them that needs to be fixed, whether it be their hair, their clothes, the color of their skin, their mannerisms, their culture? Why do we feel as a society that it's perfectly justified to tell anybody that there's something inherently wrong about themselves that has to be fixed? All too often, when we're young, these taunts and teases and small gestures and remarks that we hear from other people don't affect us because we're too young to know what they mean. But all too often, these remarks, taunts, teases, and gestures follow us later on into our adult lives and adolescence, too commonly affecting at least 50% of the population with a condition we know today as body dysmorphic disorder. So, to understand what it's like to actually have the condition and realize how we can fix our society to be more inclusive, to tackle the root problem of this battle of the mind, we first have to go, step into their world, and try to imagine what it's like to be them, what it actually takes to be a body dysmorphic disorder sufferer. Next, we have to realize who it affects and how it affects the individuals. From there, we're going to step on and go and realize what is it within our current society that is inhibiting us from doing this. And lastly, we're going to realize how can we fix our society to be more inclusive and accepting to help BBD survivors recover. So, to begin with, BBD, or body dysmorphic disorder, is a condition according to the IOSPC that affects 1 in every 50 individuals. Now, at first, this doesn't seem like a significant number, but of course, the cases do stack up. One common trait about all BBD victims is the fact that they're different, and although this may seem obscure to say, there is no contributing factor that differentiates or includes everyone who has this condition. Anybody can get it and anybody is susceptible to it. Looking at a study done by Penn State University, they gathered a total of 12,000 individuals, both men and women, and what they observed was that after asking a series of questions about the individual's general perspective about themselves, it was found that down the line, 50-50, both men and women felt that they were severely to highly dissatisfied with their individual beings. So what this tells us is that both men and women are affected equally by BBD. Moving on, we have to observe, well then, why is it that it seems women typically have better results healing than men do? Well, the reasoning typically has to do with the mentality of our society. Society typically instills into our young boys, just starting at the age of 3, that they're supposed to be confident, fearless, don't cry, because they're boys. And something about being masculine means that they're not supposed to be sharing their feelings or their emotions with the outside world. And herein lies the problem of why we don't see as much recovery within our men as we do our women. Going on, let's look at the age difference. The difference between the young and the old. Typically, according to a study done again by Penn State University, they observed mental barriers begin to develop in children around the age of 11, 12, and 13 when puberty begins. But it doesn't matter how old or how young you are. Anybody can develop this condition. It's only the fact that they begin exhibiting symptoms of BBD when they're younger that most people try to attribute body dysmorphic disorder to a condition of younger generations. But this is not true. Any age can get BBD, and it doesn't matter how old or how young you are. So now we have realized exactly who it is that can get BBD, but we need to know how it affects individuals. Well, going on to a research study done by Psychology Today, what we need to know is how it affects the people in the mind. The mind is the battlefield for people who suffer with BBD, and that's because BBD is a chronic case, I guess you could say, of self-hatred, as some call it, self-loathing, the inherent feeling that something about them needs to be changed. And that is where the problem begins, is the mentality that there's something wrong about people that they have to fix, whether again it be their hair, their color, their mannerisms. And all too often, other factors such as the body, the beauty industry, the health industry, and things like the modeling industry feed into our own sense of self-insecurities by showing us images that aren't realistic to what we're supposed to be striving to be in our status quo. And this is, again, how it affects people in the mind, is by instilling into them that there's something about them that doesn't match up to the images that they see, and those images are what they feel that they're supposed to be like. But this is not true. And other underlying health indicators, such as childhood traumas, health and weight eating disorders, as well as things such as environmental factors, health, can also contribute to people having BBD, but it's not the only thing. So, moving on. We know who it affects and how it affects individuals. But why is it that we can't see recovery in our status quo? Well, let me paint you a picture. Imagine that every day you came home and you saw your older sister crying by your bedside because she thought she was too fat. Imagine that every day at dinner you saw your mother going just one salad at a time, days and days, and behind her smiles and her saying, "I'm okay," you knew she was starving and inside, withering away and wasting away to nothing. Imagine that every day after you came home from school, you saw your older brothers going on mile-long runs and training endlessly so they could be physically fit or healthy. But behind all those bandages and bruises and those wounds, you knew that they were hurting themselves, all in the name of a better physique. This is the reality that thousands of Americans in our status quo today conform themselves to, and this is the very reason why we don't see healing, is because this mentality that people have given themselves that are contributed by environmental factors and our society are keeping them back. Additionally, we can't find recovery within our current status quo because, again, going by a Washington Post study in 2019, it was reported that out of all the individuals who were asked in a conductive survey, 28% of individuals felt that body dysmorphic disorder was not a real condition, but rather just extreme self-esteem. But this is, again, not the case, because BBD is a real condition. Just like the brain, every part of the body or organ that has a dysfunction, they call it a condition. And BBD is a legitimate condition that affects people and never goes away on its own. So to properly start having more inclusivity for people who are suffering with this condition, we first have to realize and accept that it is a real problem. So acceptance is one thing, but how do we really get people to understand BBD is a real issue, and how do we have more inclusivity in our society as a whole? The answer is simple. Going back to the root problem of BBD, we realize that it's always because of a perceived flaw. And once we accept the differences that make up our unique society, we realize that this perceived flaw is no flaw at all, but everybody has something unique and individual that they contribute to our society. And once we start praising and rejoicing all those differences that make people who they are, that is when we will have healing and recovery for our nation, is uplifting our brothers and sisters with BBD and showing them that they're unique, because just like the walrus with her beautiful body, or the leopard with her spots, every single trait that makes up people as a whole is what makes up our nation. And acceptance is the first step to getting inclusivity in our society. Just one kind word a day, for example, can help BBD sufferers by 50% by boosting the dopamine levels in their brain, according to Psychology Today. Whether it be one kind word, one kind gesture, a hug, or just uplifting people with sweet remarks about who they are, we can make more inclusive societies for our BBD brothers and sisters. So first, by looking and realizing who BBD affects and realizing anyone can be affected, understanding how individuals are being affected, realizing what we need to do to stop BBD, and ultimately making that first step to change the mentality of our society, we're going to be able to uplift our brothers and sisters with BBD and have total recovery. Thank you.